Sorry, I have another consult today. They think the other one's a bulldog too, so I was like, I know one of these guys is aggressive or something. So
Yeah, no,
okay.
no, no. I can't even thank you enough for getting us, having us come in so quickly. I
Oh.
feel like this is our kind of our last resort.
Okay. Was there been previous trainers?
No.
Okay.
He's not very trainable.
Okay.
We got him, a little backstory, we've had him since March 2020, right at the beginning of COVID.
Okay.
He was with 2 doctors down in Springfield, and he got adopted with his litter mate from a breeder in Canada, and they had to surrender him to a bulldog rescue that I volunteer with because I guess he was fighting with his litter mate. And it was COVID. They had 2 little kids, and they just couldn't deal with it. So they surrendered him to the rescue. We agreed to foster him because we had to put down our bulldog a few months earlier for aggression. Had no intention of adopting him, and then
Here we are.
here we are. Yeah, we wound up fostering him longer than we expected because we closed down all the home visits and interviews because of COVID. And so by the time we were like, we fell in love with him and we wound up adopting him.
Okay.
Everything was great. That was 2020. Fast forward to maybe the first instance of any kind of aggression was about a year later, 2021, towards my dad when they were up visiting for one of my children's graduations. And he was, again, in the kitchen and just kind of got too close to me, I guess, and he was sitting in between us and just kind of lunged. It hadn't been happening that frequently, but I've noticed lately there's been an uptick, like him doing that to my husband, doing that to my son.
I see.
So,
Any punctures? Any actual bites?
I mean, not bad. Like it's through clothes, so not like not bad. But yeah, it's bad enough that there's like a mark left, but not like.
What about bruising?
Not really. Just kind of like little.
Okay.
Like just marks.
Like scratches.
It kind of, yeah.
I gotcha.
But I mean, he's obviously got a strong mouth, and nobody wants to be on the receiving end of any kind of aggression.
Okay.
This did happen to us with our prior bulldog that we rescued. She was fine for the first. We brought her in from the rescue, and she was fine for about the first year. She was an older rescue. She was like 5 at the time, and then something happened, and she just flipped a switch and started protecting me. And same thing, started going after people who came into the house, that were around me.
Okay.
And we wound up having to put her down.
Who's in the home?
So right now, there's 3 of us that are there all the time. My husband, my 17-year-old son, and I have 2 children who are in college.
Okay. With the previous dog?
There were all 5 of us.
All 5. Okay.
In the home, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Now I'm seeing it repeat itself, so I don't want to put another dog down.
I guess.
And I want him to have a chance. I didn't move fast enough with the prior dog. I did bring in trainers. They were not helpful. They kind of gave me. One of them told me everyone should come in and make themselves bigger, if possible, to establish dominance, and that just made it worse.
Yeah.
The other one was just kind of what we were already doing, positive reinforcement, distraction, and it didn't work either. And then she wound up biting my neighbor, and we were just like, yeah, we're done. Okay.
When the bite with the neighbor happened, previous dog, right?
Yeah.
Were they coming into the home, or what was the context there?
Oh, yeah, we were all in, we have a kitchen family room, so we were all in that space.
Okay.
And, I think we were all watching a football game or something on the TV that's in that space. So
Did they jump up and clap or something?
I don't even remember. But I know it was within the vicinity of me, that had happened. So I feel like he guards me, and I don't want to be guarded. I mean.
And this is in the home.
Yeah.
If you're out the home, you don't worry about that.
Not really. We were just away for Thanksgiving, and he does get a little hyper. Even out of the home, he's still a little on edge. We still feel like I have to leave the space sometimes if I want to make sure this behavior doesn't happen outside the home. He was a little on edge when we were away this past week.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and I seem to be the only common denominator.
Yeah. So like if you were at home and it was like just your husband or your kids.
He's great. I go away for the weekend. He is just a couch potato, full of love. Everything's great.
Okay. How much attention do the kids give the dog?
I mean, They could give him more, to be honest. You know, I have a high,
husband?
not that much.
With the previous dog, was it the same?
Uh, Probably. I mean, they were 3 high schoolers at the time, and you know, they were in and out. And our house is, I mean, as you know, Chicago, there's a lot of stimulus. We have kids coming in and out, and friends, and so I feel like with him now, I'm noticing it. I want to keep like everything quiet. Like he's instantly reactive to someone sneezing. He'll jump up out of a dead sleep and, you know, start barking.
Like your 17-year-old sneezing?
Yeah, yeah, like anybody. Like my husband can be up on the top floor and sneeze, and he'll just be like, you know, he'll jump up and just instantly be on guard.
Okay.
So he's very reactive to loud noises. He, you know, yeah, and I don't know what his behavior is like when I'm not around. To be honest, all I hear is he's great. Like everyone's like, he's chill, he's fine. So I am the problem, I guess.
Are you home a lot?
I work. No, I work outside the house.
Okay.
I'll come home at lunch and walk him. So he's alone a lot during the mornings,
Okay.
but he sleeps most of the time. I mean, that's kind of what he does.
And then you would be like the primary caregiver then?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This mark on his side here?
Oh, he's got him on both sides.
Oh, I thought so. I was like,
Yeah, yeah. When we first adopted him, he had all of his hair. He was a year old. The following fall, 6 months later, he just started losing all of his hair on both sides. Vet said it was seasonal flank allergies. We have since heard, you know, another vet said alopecia. It's never grown back.
Wow, with dogs, huh?
No one seems to know. They just assumed it was stress related because he went from Springfield, a very, I guess, calm, quiet environment, to Chicago, and within 6 months, you know,
This happened.
Yeah.
So we get on March 2020, and then 6 months after that, this happens.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, in the fall.
So does it ever just grow back or no?
No.
Just how it is?
No, the only thing people have told me that the vets have said is melatonin. So he's been on melatonin pretty much every day in the last 4.5 years. It's never grown back.
Melatonin? Isn't that to help you sleep?
Yeah, but evidently
Helps
That-
you?
that's what
Interesting.
yeah. So I also have him on. He has melatonin. He gets omeprazole every day. Just we've always had our bulldogs on omeprazole because they have a lot of issues, digestive issues.
I see.
And I started putting him on Pet Relief CBD oil
Okay.
about 6 months or so ago.
Okay. Is that just to kind of calm him down?
Supposed to, yeah. So he gets a extra large dog dose. He's in the extra large dog category of 70 plus pounds. So he gets that twice a day. The bigger dose in the morning, smaller dose at night.
Have you noticed any change?
He was kind of chill for a while, and then I don't know what's happened, but there have been a few episodes where he's gotten aggressive in the house. So that's why I'm here, because
I
I'm
see.
at the point either I have to give him back to the rescue before this gets too bad, or we need to figure out if there's a way we can.
No, I'm sorry. How long has the CBD been around?
About 6 months.
6 months. Okay. Anything else I should know about him?
No.
Okay. And sorry, your
No.
dog's name again?
Buttersnaps?
Buttersnaps. Okay. And then Kim, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So the reason why he's guarding you is because you're the both dogs guarded you. It's just because you're the primary caregiver. You're the resource, the
Yeah.
greatest resource.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I pay attention to them. I snuggle with them. I give them, all the
Yeah, yeah.
food. Yep.
So, because it's interesting that you have two different dogs, you know, breed, sure, it just happens to be the same, and they both guarded you. So I'm like, all right, there has to be a common denominator here, not just you, but what you're doing different from everybody else that makes you guardable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I try to remind my clients, like, our dogs are animals, right? Because when I tell them, like, you're a resource to the dog, they're like, I'm a what? And they get so offended, right? I'm like, yeah, because you bring the food, you bring the water, right? You bring attention, you bring play. Like, all these things that you do for the dog, like, those are resources that you're providing, which then makes you a resource, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, the dogs that I work with that have the hardest time making progress have the most loving dog owner. Okay, and at some point it'll come up in the training, and I'll bring it up in the consult like I'm doing here with you. But I'll bring it up in the training because I just had this happen in the past week. I have a client. They went up to the suburbs because they're doing construction on their condo, They're gone for like 3 months, and they came back, and they were kind of still stuck and struggling, if not regressed a little, right? And they're telling me all the things that they're struggling with and everything, and a lot of it was just the emotional component of like correcting the dog and all that stuff. Because the dog is I'll admit, not an easy dog. It's a very vocal dog, also very stubborn dog, which doesn't mix well. Then we have emotional owners.
Yeah.
And I go, the reason why you guys are stuck is because you're not willing to push past the part, like this messy middle that we refer to get to the other side, because you think you're hurting your dog, or you're making your dog worse or anything like that. I was like, but that's the whole reason why we're here, is because your dog was already having these issues.
Yeah.
I was like, and that's why in these past 3 months, you haven't made progress and or regress, because you're unwilling to continue to push further without my guidance. With my guidance, because I'm there, we're making progress each week. But then the moment you remove me, it's not uncommon in certain cases for the dog to regress, because the owners no longer have me kind of coaching them along, you know? So when I get clients that absolutely love their dog, you know, a lot of times separation anxiety, which I asked, one of the questions I asked was like, are you home a lot? Then you said, no, I do leave the home, which is good.
Yeah.
Right? But obviously, if you're the one that like walks him and then feeds him and waters him and cuddles with him or whatever, and everybody else is just kind of living their life, and he's just the dog, he's just a guest in the home, well, he's like, well, of course I'm going to protect you, like you're mine.
Right,
you know?
right.
So all that makes sense to me, okay? The difficulty with these kinds of cases, okay, is I cannot make him like your husband coming into your space if he's around, or your 17-year-old, or your other kids, or any other person. Okay. Can we address it? Can we correct the behavior? Yes. But I don't go, you're gonna sit on the couch, we're gonna put him in the middle, we're gonna bring your husband over, we're gonna make him act out, and we're gonna just punish it. Because that opens us up to liability in the future, if that makes sense. Because what happens is the dog will start to pick up on things and go, okay, I will be corrected for guarding mom, so on and so forth, right? But then sooner or later, complacency kicks in. And it could be 6 months after training. No incidents. Everything's perfect. And then one day, he's sitting next to you, and your husband comes in to give you a kiss goodbye. And then that day, he decides, what about today? And then he bites. Yeah. And now we have that liability. Yeah. Okay? I approach things very cautiously, and I always warn people about complacency. It's one of the most common things that I come across with clients. They'll get 2 years of like just awesomeness, and then one day they go, you know what, I'm not going to pick up the bone today because we've had 2 years of no problem. And then they have the worst dog fight in 2 years. I'm like, yeah, because you're being consistent and putting things away and stuff like that. This was actually a true story that happened, where a client one day walked in from home, the 2 dogs were out, there was a bone on the floor, and she's like, wow, you guys didn't get in a fight, because the humans know to always put everything away. Right. So she didn't put it away. She went in to go put up her coat, get ready, get settled in the home, and the next thing you know, dog fight. And she's like, Jesse, this is the worst fight that we've had in 2 years. Yeah. I was like, because, and then she's like, and you know what? My instinct told me, put it away, but then I was like, it's been 2 years. They didn't fight when we were gone, right? And then I walk away for 5 minutes to get ready to, settle in, dog fight. I go, yep. I was like, that's the complacency that usually gets people. Yeah. Okay. So what I do is I give very realistic expectations. We would have to put a lot of boundaries in place. We'd have to change the way that we interact with our dog. And some of that entails we don't do as much affection. We treat the dog as a dog, right? We make these changes, and we see, does it help the dog psychologically or psychology-wise, right? Because this is an established relationship, okay? And we have to kind of undo that relationship and reconfigure it so he sees it differently. So then if he doesn't see you as a resource and instead sees you as a leader, authority figure, mom means business, right? He's like, well, there's nothing in the garden anymore, because she's no longer serving me. I have to serve her. I have to do what she tells me, if that makes sense. Yeah. And if I act out, there's going to be consequence, and I don't want the consequence. But it's all that paired with, there's certain things that I don't do. So if he was sitting next to you and your husband was going to sit next to you, I would remove him from the couch and send him somewhere else. And then your husband comes and sits down. Because what gives him the ability to guard you is if he's here, right? Is he's in your intimate space. So when someone comes in, you can see how they're kind of intruding into that space. But now to him, you're like a single unit. So then he's like, you're not going to sit next to her. But if someone comes and I go, hey, you go over there, and I remove him from my space, he is no longer in my intimate space in order to guard. So then theoretically, when the person comes and sits down, we shouldn't see anything. Now, could something still happen? Yes, but that's something that could be addressed. Okay, like we can teach them like, hey, your job is to be over there or get away from me. When the person comes, if he triggers, I can correct them, and that can be safely addressed because it's not immediate. If he's here and we force the situation of your husband sitting here, if he wants to bite him, he's right there.
Right.
Right? Whereas if he's over there, he has to close the gap, which gives me opportunity to address the behavior before there's any contact.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. We kind of do that now. Like, we'll put him in his crate. Like, his whole world is in the kitchen family area.
Okay.
His crate is there. His food dishes are there. All of his toys. He's allowed on the couch. Like, we have a big leather sofa. That's his. So that's his. Like I said earlier, that's his domain.
Okay.
So if I feel like there's going to be a situation, we've gotten good with removing triggers. Like, my son has all these supplements he uses, and just the sound of the canisters and, you know, him pouring stuff into glasses and shaking it, or pills used to set him off. And I was like, we need to remove this from the kitchen. So my son does that somewhere else now. And that has helped. But we'll put him in his crate. If we think it's a triggering situation, we'll just crate him.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's making it worse and he's seeing it as a punishment. He likes his crate. I mean, he sleeps in it. It's his safe space.
So the only time you make these behaviors worse is if we trigger the dog and then remove the stimuli. So let's say your son brings out the supplements. He triggers, and then your son goes, sorry, forgot, and he leaves the room. That makes things worse, because what's he learning? Well, if I trigger, when you do that, you'll leave. So now that's been reinforced. Does that make sense? But if I know, oh, my son left the supplements over here, he's going to come in right now, I need you to go over there, and he leaves, then your son comes in and does that stuff, and we get no trigger. He doesn't understand you sent him away because of what was going to happen, and you're trying to avoid it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, dogs are smart, but there's certain things that they can't tie together. And those are sometimes, with certain cases, I'll tell the client, like, if you have no option, you can do it this way because you're avoiding the trigger. Like, for example, people coming over. The door knock tends to be the trigger. So a workaround is people will sometimes meet their dog, meet the guest outside. Then they enter the home together as a unit, so there's never a knock. Because the knock's the catalyst.
And I do that. I'll be like, hey, text me when you're here and I'll let you in, so you don't have to keep...
But it doesn't make him reacting to the knock worse because you're working around the problem and he's not syncing together. You're only doing this so that I don't bark at the door. Like, that's not a thing a dog could do. A human could do that. Right? And that's the issue, is a lot of times people think that the dog is thinking how they're thinking and you're connecting these things. They go, no. There's certain things that they can, for sure, but there's a lot of times where we can do workaround. Like, for example, when I said send him away if your husband's going to sit next to you, right? Because I'm assuming something may happen, but he doesn't understand that I'm doing that to prevent the problem. Okay? We think that, but then that's what confuses people. Okay? So I'm a balance of challenging the dog. There's certain things that he, like, I believe personally that if someone sneezes, he shouldn't be barking or reacting. If your son brings out supplements, he shouldn't be reacting. And those are things that can be corrected and addressed. Where I don't believe he needs to be sent away. It's the things that's like, okay, he may guard me, and if you're going to come into my personal space, that I go, that we want to be careful with, because I just don't want anybody to get bit.
Right.
Okay? Because sooner or later, I know complacency is going to settle in. Or your husband goes like, wow, it's been like 8 months, and he's not come at me. And then he comes in and goes, hey, buddy, which he never did before. And then the dog reacts. I've had that happen to people. They're like, Jesse, I don't understand what happened. The dog was great. And then, you know, person came in and greeted them. I'm like, that's why. Because before, we always had them ignore. And then now, they're like, oh, he's doing good. I guess they can greet him now. I go, no, if we've never done the greeting, then the dog's not going to be capable of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
So, do you have any questions?
Well, I was looking at all your videos, and I spent all last Sunday just pouring through all the testimonials and the training, and it looks like you use an e-collar. Is that an option with bulldogs? I mean, do they make them big enough?
Yeah, it's a one-size-fit-all.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. You know, they can fit up to a 180-pound Tibetan Mastiff.
Okay.
With straps and everything. But I will say that the fact that you have a bulldog is what does make things a little bit trickier. Okay, I've trained a few bulldogs in 15 years. One is skin sensitivity. They're more prone to have, because it's two probes. The probes are made of metal. I can't
Yep.
tell you which metal, but because of skin allergies or whatever, there are hypoallergenic probes. So that is an issue that can be resolved. I've only ever had one bulldog that I trained that no matter what adapter we put on the on the collar, the owners had to be very mindful that they could only have it on the dog for like 15 to 30 minutes at a time.
Okay.
Which their dog didn't have any aggression issues. It was just obedience stuff. So it wasn't a big deal. And then if they just rotated the collar. So you have to rotate the collar every hour and a half to 2 hours if the dog is wearing it extensively.
Okay.
But in this particular case, if the dog was wearing it for an hour, they would have to rotate it twice. Whereas the average dog, you'd put it on and you wouldn't have to do that. But other bulldogs, I've noticed that have allergy issues. So I always tell clients in the consult, anticipate this.
Yep.
But there's hyperallergenic probes that we can use, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing about bulldogs is they tend not to have a lot of stamina.
Yeah.
They tend to tire out very quickly.
Yep.
Which we could be doing a training session and we could be 15 to 20 minutes in and the dog's like, I'm
And then
done.
you got that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, but the training session is an hour.
Yeah.
And then for me, in order for me to get enough done, we need to push for an hour.
Yeah.
So that's just another thing there. And usually with training, and this is with all dogs, is I train for like 5 to 10 minutes and then we talk. Okay. And then we train for another 5 to 10 minutes and then we talk. So ideally with that gap where we're having, that kind of Q&A, if you have questions or what have you, or concerns, the dog is resting, but then we want to do another little session because ideally we want to try to get at least 3 kind of training sessions in within that hour to get the concept across, and then you go home and simply practice. Okay. But that is one thing with bulldogs is that they just tire out quickly.
So that would have been another question I had. Since the aggression is happening in my home with my family, where would the training
Are
take
you in the
place?
city?
Yeah, we're in Lincoln Park.
Okay. So it would be a mixture unless you wanted just purely in-home. So I used to do all in-home. So I used to travel to all my clients before, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then nobody wanted me coming over anymore.
Yeah.
So I had to change how I operated my business. So I was home to home since like 2009, 2010. Come 2019, I had a lot of demand for clients that need to be able to board their dogs. So I deal with a lot of aggression, so they couldn't really go anywhere. And I was boarding dogs at my home, and then I had too many dogs. So I'm like, all right, I need a facility. So September of 2019, I got my brick and mortar. 6 months later, COVID happened. So I'm there like, I got this $30,000 a month overhead cost with rent and employees or whatever. I got to figure out something. So then I knew that I could train dogs without having to handle them myself, but nobody believed I could. Because everybody's used to the trainer does something and then, the human does it. But I got a referral from a previous client and they're like, we're desperate. We trust you. Okay. The dog had dislocated the husband's shoulder 3 times in 2 years, sent him into the ER 2 times. It was an 80 to 90 pound dog, completely friendly, but pulled so hard that he would drag you on the ground or knock you over. Okay. So they were my first post-COVID client. One class to the next, walking perfectly. And they're like, Jesse, this is great. And again, it's just verbal instruction. I coached them from a distance. And then by the 3rd class, they were just blown away because I had fixed the leash pulling. The dog was much more obedient. We had covered recall. The dog was actually recalling. And they did a testimonial video. The dog's name is Nash. It's still up on my YouTube. It's a blonde lady. And after I put up that testimonial video, clients started coming.
Yeah.
And I started training out of Oz Park because it's the busiest park in Chicago.
Yeah.
A lot of my clients were Lakeview Lincoln Park, so central to both neighborhoods.
Yep.
A lot of people knew it. And it was all verbal instruction. And then post-COVID, it was so, successful. Like, clients were like, Jesse, I'm here at Oz Park and like my dog's being obedient. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That we just continued with it.
Yeah.
So, but now my clients all travel to me.
Yeah.
So whether it's at Oz Park or here at my facility, so I still do in-homes. The only issue is there's a $50 upcharge for each in-home lesson.
Okay.
Okay. So what some clients will do is they'll handle the obedience stuff here because we don't need to be, it doesn't matter where we are. And then the stuff that needs to be in home, like the aggression or the territorial behavior, what have you, they would simply just book those. Okay. So it helps drive their costs down a little bit. Now I get some clients that are like, I just want all my classes in home. I go, sure, no problem. But the reason why it's there's the upcharge is I have to leave here now or leave Oz Park to go to you, and then possibly come back to then continue the rest of my day. There's also limitation in terms of availability because I just can't be all over the place all the time. But Tina would, figure all that stuff out.
So have you seen a situation, like I saw a testimonial on your site and a woman described a very similar situation she had with a pit bull mix that was guarding her essentially. And it sounds like it was something you were able to figure out and work out.
Yes.
I mean,
But it's not like,
I know each one is different, but.
Yes. It's not, so I don't like the word fix.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is it's fixed and it's good until it's broken again.
Yeah.
It's fixed because the owner's doing a good job about the rules and boundaries, reinforcing the training, consequence, but then also not setting themselves up to fail in situations where we deem it's not rewarding enough.
Yeah.
So like leash reactivity, lunging and barking on the leash. Obviously, we want to be able to walk our dogs, so we have to correct that behavior because the reward of being able to walk our dog in peace is worth that.
Yeah.
Right? But earlier when I mentioned, like, I wouldn't force your dog to be here, and then you have your husband come in your intimate space because I anticipate sooner or later he may attempt to bite, and the risk of your husband being bitten isn't worth the reward of just having him stay there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like the client I mentioned earlier that was struggling, that took the 3-month hiatus, likes to have the dog sleep in the bed. But whenever they move, the dog will growl and or snap at them.
Oh,
okay? And I told them, I cannot make the dog like you rolling around and tussling in your sleep.
Right.
Right? It's just kind of like with humans.
Yeah.
If you dislike something, no one can make you like that something.
Yeah.
So for example, I at one point didn't like sushi. I thought it was gross. And then a friend of mine was like, come to this all-you-can-eat buffet, try the Godzilla roll, it's cooked, right? And I'm like, all right, and it was delicious. And now I eat nigiri, sashimi, uni. I love it, right?
Yeah.
But I had an experience that changed my opinion,
Yeah.
right? We can't really do that with dogs.
Yeah.
We can't go like, hey, bud, just try it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe you like it,
Yeah.
right? Now, like things like, let's say dogs that are afraid of swimming in the swimming pool, that's a bit different because we're not worried about the dog being aggressive with the swimming pool, right? It's just, I'm scared to swim. But then once they experience swimming, then they may decide, I like swimming. But in this particular case, I'm like, it's the dog not liking you moving around because it doesn't want to be bothered. So in my opinion, I don't have the dog in the bed. It doesn't deserve that privilege, okay? And that's, again, the stuff that people struggle with.
Yeah.
Is they have a hard time letting that stuff go, which holds them back. Because in my opinion, the dog realizes this.
Yeah.
The dog's like, you want to tell me to stop being reactive or stop guarding the door, but then you still let me sleep in the bed and tell you what to do in the bed. I tell you what to do in the bed.
Yeah.
I get clients, it'll be the wife, the dog, husband leaves to use the bathroom, comes back, dog won't let the husband back in the bed.
Yeah. No, I know I'm probably the weak link in the forcing him to do stuff. I mean, I primarily walk him and he's awful on leash. I mean, he's pulling me left, right, like where if he doesn't want to go in the direction I want to go, he'll just sit down and there's no getting a 70-pound
and
bulldog.
that's all easy.
So is this like that to me would be secondary to dealing with the aggression, or is it all done at the same time?
It's all pieces to a bigger puzzle.
Okay.
So if you can't get your dog to walk nicely, how are you going to get him to stop the aggression? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One is a very simple behavior. The other one is more dangerous, complicated behavior.
Yeah.
So if I go sit and he's like, I'm not going to sit, then how am I going to say stop baiting people?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's why both the obedience and the consequence and the accountability that we can hold the dog to empowers what we say.
Yeah.
And empowers us psychologically to the dog.
Yeah.
So that later on, when I'm like, you're not going to do that behavior. You're not going to, lunge at my husband or what have you. The dog's like, sorry, I understand. I'm going to be responsive. So most people think that when we do behavioral stuff, it's come in, trigger the behavior, and just punish it. And that's technically an approach, but it's not the approach that we use from the start. We always start with obedience first, discipline. The dog has to understand the collar, what it means, what it's communicating, and then we start to push behaviors. So then if I go to correct them for something, like let's say barking at the sneeze, he understands what the collar is communicating.
Okay.
Okay. If you read the manual, if you go on Google, you may read, don't use e-collars on aggressive dogs because it'll make them more aggressive. Okay. And that's a yes and no statement. If the dog is conditioned poorly, does not understand the e-collar correctly, yes, it can make the dog more aggressive. Or I had a reactive case this past weekend. Very reactive dog. It was the third class. We were just starting to work on the reactivity. In a controlled setting, we were at a 45 out of 127 on the collar. Okay, so about like a third. And then I had a client come in. When that client came in, the dog blew up. Okay, 45 went out the window. We had to go all the way to 90, 95 before the dog finally stopped the behavior and began to chill out. Okay, so you see the change there?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, when we were at 45, because the dog was so intense, they looked worse because it wasn't enough to get them to think, I need to stop what I'm doing. Once we hit 90, all of a sudden the dog started to settle down, right? But if you're just like the average person doing this on your own, you're like, I'm making the dog worse. But we would keep going up until the dog decides, I'm going to stop what I'm doing now. And then you see the dog stop being aggressive. But when people come to me with that question, I go, yes, but there's reasons why it would make the dog more aggressive, which is why we would do conditioning first, and then we target behaviors, okay? And we always start low, and then we work our way up until we find what would be the correct setting for the dog in that context.
So my sister-in-law, we were down visiting family, and she uses an e-collar on her dog, a different brand, and she watched a lot of videos and trained herself. Her dog was aggressive towards other dogs on walks, but she's had great success with it. She doesn't need it for humans, but I am concerned because bulldogs, I mean, they just are special. Like they're not. I hate to say they're not trainable. I've never really, I guess, tried to train one, but kind of the joke amongst all the bulldog owners is they're just going to do what they want to do no matter what.
Well, bulldogs, Pyrenees, bull terriers, the more stubborn, resilient breeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of it's because like these guys are bred to take pain. If you look at their mouth and everything, like I have a bull terrier that I trained whose number was like 100 and something, didn't even flinch, could care less about it. And the owner's like looking at, they're like, this is crazy, because I trained to have 2 bull terriers. I trained the first one. The first one was the easiest, probably one of the best dogs I've trained in 15 years, okay? Very receptive to the collar. The second bull terrier, the complete opposite. She's just sitting there, you're at 100 and something, same collar and everything. She's like, I could care less about this.
Yeah.
She's not in pain. She's just completely overriding it.
Yeah.
And the owners are like, wow, like that's crazy. I'm like, well, you got to understand these guys are bred for fighting. Like sometimes that comes through and it impacts their resiliency to the collar. But it's almost always usually bulldogs, pit bulls, bull terriers, these kind of big power breeds that tend to have higher settings. I've not had a dog that I've not been able to train as long as the owner follows the directions. Okay. That's again always the discrepancy is like.
Yeah, no, we're at the point. I mean, I could see him looking at me like trying to. It's so weird. He'll just look up at me like looking for instruction. Like if we're out walking, and I'll be like, "Let's go this way," and he'll just stop and look at me like, "Which way do you want to go?" Yeah. Like I think he's probably craving structure. I mean, he gets structure. Like everything is the same. He has his crate. He goes into his crate at night. His meal times are the same. That's structured, but. Evidently, I think we're missing out more on
So structure, human structure and dog structure is different.
Yeah.
Dog structure is I'm with my mom, and you're not coming into our space. That's structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like this is a boundary, and if you impede on that boundary, I will bite you, or I will try to bite you with physicality, right?
Yeah.
So like here, a lot of dogs have left. We have like 30 dogs, and if we were to be outside, so our heat. Went out, and then I had my HVAC guy come in, and then didn't work, so he has to come back to see what the problem is. So normally we'd be out there, and you'd be out there and you'd be like, "There's dogs here." I'm like, "Yeah, we have 30 dogs right now." Sometimes you have 50 to 60 dogs, but it's still quiet because it's structured.
Yeah.
Dogs are given consequence if they get a line. There's no barking, there's no whining, there's no jumping, there's no fighting, there's none of that stuff.
Yeah.
But because we correct them in the way that they understand. Regularly and consistently, the dogs are able to coexist harmoniously. And we get dogs that are human aggressive, dog reactive, anxious, fearful, nervous, everything under the sun. We get it here. And they all just coexist peacefully because of the structure. Okay? Human structure is I wake up, I walk my dog, I come back, I feed them.
Yeah,
it's routine.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
dog structure is different. Dog structure is if you touch my bowl, I'll bite you.
Yeah.
If you get too close to my owner, I'll bite you.
Yeah.
If you walk into my home, I'll bite you.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was going to a doggy daycare up until about 9 months or so ago, maybe a year ago, but he likes dogs. He's actually good with other dogs if they like him first. I mean, if a dog all of a sudden just goes off on a walk and doesn't want anything to do with them, then that's fine. But most dogs are curious. They don't know what to make of them, and he's good with dogs. He was disinvited to come back. They broke him up by size, so he was in the medium room. So he was in a room with maybe 25 other dogs, and he'd be fine most of the time, but he was gate guarding. So as soon as a human walked in the room, he would like snap at any dogs that like tried to get near the human, and they were like, we can't, that's not safe. And if he comes here, he's going to have to just be in his own room. And I'm like, well, it defeats the purpose.
So like we would correct that. So like there's things that my handlers don't do. So like here we don't pet dogs, but it happens, right? Because like for me, I look at it as the dogs are being sent here for structure, not affection. Because if we give them affection, then I'm now their buddy. I'm not their authority figure.
Right.
Like that's how that stuff works, right?
Right.
So like the other day we had an employee who had a scuffle happen, and she broke a nail. And I was like, what happened? Because those were like two dogs that like we've never had an issue with or whatever. And she's like, oh, well, I was petting so-and-so, and when I crouched down, the other dog came in, and then it happened. And I'm like, that's why we don't pet dogs here. One, we don't pet dogs, period, but two, we don't pet dogs, especially in the playpen, because then they'll guard you. And since then, she's learned to stop that behavior, okay? And so there's certain things that we don't do knowing it'll create problems. Or like we don't have toys in the playpen.
Yeah.
Because dogs will resource guard.
Yeah.
So if I remove the toys, there's nothing to guard, I
Yeah.
now don't have to worry about that problem.
Yeah.
We've had dogs, it's not common, but gate guard, and we can simply correct it with the collar. And we're like, you're not going to guard the gate. So then the dog learns, like, okay, dogs come in and out, nothing I can do about it. But other places don't do that. Other places, it's just like a free-for-all.
Yeah.
Also, we do smaller groups. We do like 8 to 12 dogs.
Yeah.
We don't do 25 dogs.
Yeah.
There's some places where you can have 100 dogs in a room.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It seemed like a lot for him. And would he be able to act, like once he was started training, would he be able to access the daycare boarding just so he could socialize with other dogs? Like once you said it was,
So like typically it's after about the second or third class.
Okay.
The dog's had enough conditioning with the collar so that if when he's here we need to apply it, we can apply it. For dogs that we've trained, they're not required to attend daycare. They can board at any point. Okay. Clients whose dogs have not done training are required to do daycare once a week.
okay.
So in the past, I was more lenient on that. And what would happen is we wouldn't see dogs for months. Then they would come back and then destroy stuff
Yeah.
because of stress.
Yeah.
Whereas with the dogs that we've trained, because they come with the tool that we can use to correct, plus your structure at home ideally is the same as the structure we have here, is we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
So it's just like a second home for the dog. Plus I have clients in St. Charles, Winnetka, Skokie, Wilmette, Hoffman Estates, Indiana, Wisconsin. Like I'm not expecting them to come once a week for daycare.
Yeah.
So for them, it's like nice. I can take my dog somewhere and not have to worry about trying to commit once a week to like drive to the city.
Yeah.
So
he wouldn't need any kind of boarding training kind of thing. Like we're talking about like just coming here for sessions or having you come to the house to deal with the aggression part first. I saw you had like a board and train, but that seemed more was like obedience.
So
training.
Obedience is going to be a part of it regardless.
Okay.
Because remember, like it's the fact that you're telling him to sit, to stay, the down or whatever. Let's say he doesn't sit, and you press on the collar. You're giving a correction now. So now it's you correcting him. That's the power behind the obedience. So anybody can teach sit. You grab a treat, you do this, you go like that, the dog sits.
Yeah, he'll do that all day long for food.
Correct. But then I'm like, but what happens if the dog doesn't sit? There is no consequence. The consequence is you don't get the treat. But that's not a consequence to the dog. Okay? Like for me growing up, if my mom said, Jesse, you didn't do your chores, you're not getting your allowance, I have an understanding of what that means. I lost out on $5 this week, right? The dog doesn't care.
Yeah.
But if I go sit, he doesn't do it, and I go like this, and I give him the correction, that means something. So he's going, oh, wow, now I'm the one being corrected. And that's typically what's lacking in most owner-to-dog relationships is the physical part. I get dogs that bite their owners all the time. And the owner's like, Jesse, I don't know what to do with this. I'm like, we have to bite the dog back. But as a human, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why we have these tools. The prong collar, right? That spiky-looking collar there?
Yeah.
It's meant to mimic a dog bite.
Yeah.
That's why it looks that way, right? So once you start biting the dog back, is when we start to see changes in behavior, changes in choices. So growing up, I was raised old school. The first time my mom said, don't do that, it was just don't do that. But then when she said, don't do that, and then followed with a spanking, now don't do that has a completely different connotation.
Right.
Because now there's threat of consequence.
Right.
Okay. Same thing for dogs. So like the client I just walked out with prior to coming in here, that was her dog walker. And she had a lot of questions because she comes from, I give the dog a hot dog every time they do something. But then the dog will chase bikes, or the dog will go after squirrels and then completely not listen to her. I'm like, well, what happens with the hot dog? She's like, well, it doesn't do anything. I'm like, exactly. That's why we have to have consequence. So if I go, get over here, stop with the squirrels, and the dog's like, no. I'm like, all right, well, now we have consequence for that. And I'm going to make you get over here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the dog starts to learn. Like, okay, you have the ability to like assert control over me.
Yeah.
And that's what helps ideally changes behavior.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're lacking. I could see, my husband and my son do try and give him commands and make him stay and make him sit, and and then I come in and I'm just like, oh, come on over here, and I know it's me.
Well, obviously, because both you have two dogs that guarded you.
I know, and I'm looking at it like he's a kid, and he's not a kid, and I got to get that out of my mind. So we're all on board with this. We know this is kind of like where we need to go, or we're going to have to surrender him back to the rescue, and we really didn't want to do that.
So, realistically speaking, okay, just so you understand limitations and stuff. Okay. It's not, again, going to be, oh, we do the training and now people can come in and out, of your space or whatever, sit down next to you, hug you, kiss you, and we don't have to worry about him becoming offensive. It's not that. It's, we now have the ability to say, you know what, if my son's going to sit next to me, we don't need you right here right now. I need you to leave the space, but also you're not going to protest anything, right? So if your husband or your son comes and sits next to you, he's left the space, and maybe your son sneezes.
Yeah.
You're not going to be reactive. Right? Maybe your son sneezes and then brings out his supplements and does everything. He's not going to be reactive. Like those things are easier. It's just the guarding part.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
Because I can't make him like people entering your personal space.
Yeah, being close to me.
Him guarding the home is easier because it's the home.
Yeah.
Right? So we can turn that off, but when it becomes singular and it's one
Oh yeah,
person,
no, anyone could break in as long as I had a stake. He would just be like, have at it. Doesn't matter.
It's just until they come into your space.
Until if I'm there, then be like, don't touch my mother.
Yes.
So what should, I'm all on board. We're all on board. I'll talk to my husband and my son when we get back. But what should we be doing prior to training starting? Anything?
Just avoidance. Avoidance would be if there's certain things he doesn't like just removing them, putting them in the crate.
Or
You're not
removing
making it worse. You're just working around the problem.
That's kind of what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Trying not
so
to trigger them.
Continue with that.
Okay.
In regards to like what I would recommend, so in person is always best in the sense that you learn more.
Yeah.
It just takes longer.
Yeah.
Board and train is faster, but you learn less because I do the training and then we have to transfer that to you.
Yeah.
But then also like I cannot recreate like your dog guarding.
Yeah.
Right? Unless like he happened to guard me, which is not going to happen. I don't think I've ever had a dog guard me because I'm not their person.
Yeah.
Right? And then the way I treat your dog is very different from how you treat your dog. Like you're paying me to train him.
Right.
So it's boot camp here.
Yeah.
Right? So from the get-go, we get dogs that are leash reactive and the owner's like, oh, like how was it? I'm like, it happened once and then it was done. And they're like, that fast? I'm like, yeah. I was like, because it's boot camp here. Whereas for you, the dog sees you as a buddy and a companion, and that's why they don't take you seriously, and that's why it's such a struggle for them to work with the behavior.
Yeah.
So the board and train is nice just because I can get all the obedience in faster, but then you would get follow-ups, and then you could use your follow-ups to address the behaviors in the home. Okay, so.
But the human aggression part, would that be addressed? I thought human aggression part, like that would have to be like all of us together, like my son, my husband.
Correct, but and that's not really. I mean, it's human aggression because he's targeting a human, but it's really resource guarding. Human aggression is I'm going to go out my way to bite a person for whatever reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like
which he's not doing that.
Yeah. So what he's doing is he's resource guarding.
Yeah.
But he just happens to be resource guarding against humans.
Yeah.
So like let's say it was flipped and you're like, Jesse, he's fine with people, but if a dog comes into my space, he'll become aggressive. So now he's aggressive he's guarding you aggressively, but towards dogs. So it's what the target is. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the way this works would be I'd probably place you at around 9 classes if you're doing in person. The first 2 to 3 are setting the foundation. So we're going to cover leash walking in the first class. Okay, I know what the issue is, but we have to condition first. So we always start with heel. Okay. Plus, you mentioned leash pulling, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of leash pulling and just stubborn, sitting down if he doesn't get his way.
So all that stuff, that's typically 2 classes. Okay. There's part 1, there's a part 2. Come back class 3. How's he doing with leash pulling? Jesse, he's walking really well. Couldn't be happier. Great. Class 3 would most likely be stationary control. Okay. So we use like the dog bed where we can send the dog and he can be there for an extended period of time. Okay. So I want that first before the in-home stuff because we have to have the ability of giving him instruction to do something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Plus with the collar, he's learning how it turns on and how it turns off, which is the biggest thing we want to make sure the dog understands correctly. Because if I don't condition the collar correctly or at all, and I go to correct them for something, like let's say he starts growling at a person and I correct him without conditioning, it could potentially push the dog into aggression.
Okay.
Not because the collar made him aggressive, but because the dog's like, I don't know what this means.
Right.
And right now we have tension, so I think it's from you.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
Yeah.
So if we have to correct reactivity with the sneezing, reactivity with your son with the supplements, any other trigger, when we're correcting, he's understanding the correction means you're not going to do that. Okay. So then the 4th class would be like the in-home where I come in and we start targeting the simpler things. Okay. The 5th one, most likely another in-home where we start pushing thresholds. Threshold would be you're here, you have Buttersnaps. I've had cases where the human would walk into the threshold, right, of the room.
Yeah.
And the dog would start guarding at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Most dogs tend to guard in the closer proximity, but every now and then we get a dog that the moment they see someone enter the room, like it triggers. So we correct that to start to shrink the threshold so the dog is able to tolerate more. Does that make sense?
Yep. It makes perfect sense.
And what we're doing here is we're creating a buffer. Okay. Is we're correcting him for thinking about guarding when they come into the space in case it ever happens. But I'm not doing it and then telling you, okay, now just have people enter your space whenever you want. Because sooner or later, complacency is going to happen and we're going to get a bite. It happens all the time. Okay. But we're doing it because sometimes we make mistakes, right? So when we put in that buffer and someone just happens to sit next to you, that buffer is meant to, in that moment, prevent anything from happening. But then you go, oh crap, we shouldn't actually have it done it that way, if that makes sense. So easiest way to explain it would be one of my first cases was a fear aggression case. The dog hated anybody touching her tail, even the owners. Okay, so it took me 2 classes of me touching the dog's tail, and to the point where the husband got mad at me and yelled at me because he thought I was making the dog worse because the aggression was seemingly escalating. But eventually we got over it, got to the other side, and the dog would tolerate it. Okay. Fast forward a year, they were with their dog at a festival, and a kid, they were sitting so it was a festival on 18th Street. They're sitting along one of the north and south streets. A kid randomly runs up, grabs the dog by the tail, and the dog does this. And then the kid lets go and just takes off. Okay. And like everybody's looking at each other because they know the dog doesn't like that. But the dog didn't do anything. Okay. So I happened to, they were friends of a friend, and they told me, they're like, Jesse, you wouldn't believe what happened. Told me the story. I go, that's why I did the exercise.
Yeah.
I was like, you're not going to tell anybody to touch your dog's tail. You know the dog don't like it.
Yeah.
But I know sooner or later, someone's going to do it.
Yeah.
So in that moment, the buffer kicked in.
Yeah.
And nothing happened.
Yeah.
I was like, but in the future, just be more mindful and advocate for the dog so that it doesn't happen.
Yeah. That could have went south real quick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why we do those things.
Yeah.
But we're still being proactive about not allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
But we put in the buffers just in case.
Yep. Makes sense. Yep.
Buffers, unfortunately, are not 100%.
Right.
But it's better than nothing.
Okay. And is just one person in charge of the remote at all times? I mean, it's not like my husband and I would each be sick, because it's a remote, I'm assuming, right?
So yes, it's a remote. So those are all our e-collars there.
So like only should one person be in charge of the behavior in any given situation?
So a standard system will come with one remote, one collar.
Okay.
But if you'd like, you can actually have as many remotes paired to one collar as you want. Okay, so like when I call them family systems, So like the Bull Terriers, they were on a family system. So they had a remote to 2 dogs that was then duplicated, so both the husband and the wife have control over both dogs at the same time.
Okay.
Okay. So it's complete preference.
Okay.
Um,
I don't know if that confused the dog, if
No,
he
no,
knew
no.
like who was actually, you
No.
know,
So technically
doling out.
speaking, if like you say sit, he would be under your command. But then if your husband said come, that would technically override your command. He would be expected to perform that command. Right?
Okay.
So the dog can learn to respond to who's speaking,
Okay.
but that does take more uh, practice, so that the dog learns to differentiate. Okay, it's
Okay.
easy. It just takes time and
Yeah.
repetition.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
But most people, I would say, like you'd probably start off with 1, and like let's say your husband's like, "Hey, I really like this. I want my own."
Yeah.
Then we can just have the remote duplicated.
Okay.
It's
And just
easy.
leave it in the space that we have the issue, and like in this case, just leave it in the kitchen. So when people enter the kitchen,
Sure.
that's
Yeah. Or if you know, like I'm gonna walk out and then come back with somebody, and
Yeah.
that's where he has a problem, you
Yeah.
just take it with you.
okay.
You know.
Okay.
Us having a spare is nice in the sense of like it happens where someone's like, "Where did you put the remote?" You know. So,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, you can have as many as you like. But typically, I tell clients start with 1, see how you feel, and if it's like I would like to have another, we can just call the company and have them duplicate
Okay.
it, and they'll ship it out.
So you think this is a situation you can help us with at
Oh.
the end of the day? I mean.
Yeah. So the other thing is, what I'm listening for when I asked you any punctures, or
Oh,
bruising
yeah.
and stuff, is that helps me evaluate the intensity.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get dogs that go 0 to 10. Like you're getting bit. Where he's not. What he's doing, he's giving correctional bites or warning bites. He's not, like you said, he's just grazing. Dogs have great depth perception. So when someone says, "Oh, the dog almost got me, but I moved too quickly," I go, "No." I was like, the dog gauged
Yeah.
that.
Would have gotten you right.
The dog gauged it. And I even had times like the person didn't move and the dog got them and it wasn't a puncture. I was like, you need to understand that that's calculated. And that tells me something. If he really wanted to do harm, it would have happened already, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not good that things are escalating and they're
Yeah.
becoming more frequent,
Yeah.
because the more it happens and it's not being checked, the more confident he becomes
Yeah,
in using
right, right.
that, right?
Right. And that's why
So-
we're here.
So that's the positive aspect of it, is I go, he's doing it and he could go further, but he's not.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, if you ask my husband or my son who are on the receiving end of it, they're going to tell you I can't speak for what they're feeling. I know it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine, given his jaws and the strength of his mouth, it could be worse.
Yeah, they got those bulldog teeth.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, he's probably at like maybe a 6 of what he could do, just based on what they're telling me.
Sure.
I mean,
I put him at a 3.
okay.
Yeah. Because like you would have what he's doing, above that would be bruising, and then we have punctures, and then we have full-on bites, holds, and shaking. Right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
once you start
no.
to see the shaking, that's like the dog's intent is to kill.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so those are the varying degrees. This here is a dog bite, right? There's another one right there, another one right there. But this was one dog. This was a Great Dane, okay? And this is a dog that simply didn't want to go in a kennel. It wasn't an aggressive dog. He just simply panicked and freaked out. And the only way he knew to stop me was to bite me.
Right.
And he was a Great Dane. I couldn't escape it.
Right, right.
So, but 10 stitches later, a few years later, here I am. This is the first and only time that dog ever bit anybody. Comes to daycare, comes to boarding, never an issue since. Okay, and when that happened, the owners thought they had an aggressive dog. I go, no. I was like, your dog just simply freaked out. He had never been put in the kennel before, and he
Yeah, it was
wanted to
natural
stop it.
reaction.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
self-defense. you
Yeah.
know? So, but yeah, one thing to keep in mind is I can only take you as far as you're willing to go.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part about the training is just the emotional aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like let's say his number happens to be 80 out of 127. I'm not picking the number. He's picking the number.
Mm-hmm.
But the human gets stuck in their head, because if our caller has 127 levels, they're going, well, I'm 2/3 of the power. He must be really hurting.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell people, like, dogs bite each other. They bite humans too.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do. They're physical creatures, so their tolerance for pain is much greater than humans. Just like with women,
Yeah.
give birth, their tolerance for pain and discomfort is much greater than men's, right? Because of that. Same thing for dogs. Okay, but that's really the most common thing that holds people back is just the emotional component overriding logic.
Can be worse than the emotions of like giving him away. So I'm the thought of like having to give him back though. I just want him to have the best life from here forward. So if that means us training him, then great, let's do that. If he's just not trainable or he decides it's not going to work for me or whatever happens in there, then I would give him back. I just want him to like have a good life and not get put down.
If you follow through with what I say, and there's might be times where I'm like the client earlier was like, the dog doesn't get to be in the bed, right? They had like I could see them like they were getting teary-eyed.
No, I'd have
right?
no problem with that.
So
yeah,
but
yeah.
you see, like, but that's why
Everyone's
that's where
different
we start to fail.
Yeah.
But I told her, as long as you're following through and you're, the instructions and everything, it should be good. No issues.
All right. Okay.
A very common question that I get is, when does the e-collar go away? In my book, when you need it, it doesn't. Okay. Now, in the home, it doesn't mean he's always going to be with the e-collar all the time. In the beginning, it may seem like a lot, but eventually, because you spend most of your time in the home, it starts to settle down. Okay. But then there might be certain contexts where you're like, okay, XYZ is going to happen right now, so he's going to need his collar. You just simply put it on.
I kind of assumed this is probably a life, not a lifelong thing, but however long he lives. But yeah, we would need to use the collar if we anticipate.
Correct.
In a yeah.
So, do you drive?
Yeah.
Do you go on the expressway ever?
Yeah.
Do you go the speed limit?
Sure. I'm on camera, aren't I?
Everybody always does that.
Sure.
Most people don't, right? And you get stuck behind someone who does, you get upset, right? But then if you see a squad car, what happens?
Yeah, slow down.
And you pass a squad car and it's clear, what happens?
You speed up.
You speed up. So this is what's called opportunistic behavior. All animals do it, okay? So if you think of the e-collar as a cup on a collar, when it's present, your dog's going to behave better because he knows threat of consequences here. The moment you remove it, he's going to press boundaries.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, because people always ask, well, Jesse, if you're so good, why is this necessary? And then so when I bring up that example, they're like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Opportunistic behavior. If you can get away with something, why
and he
not?
would. Yeah. So
Okay.
I assume this will be a part of his regular routine.
Yes. And the reason why leash walking is so important as well,
Excuse me.
is that most people walk their dogs 3 times a day, 7 days a week. That's three times a day, 7 days a week that you're practicing and reinforcing the heel structure to keep the discipline in the brain. Dogs don't ever learn that these rules are always present, like a human would. Like, I know red means stop, green means go, yellow means slow.
Right.
Go 60 means go 60, not above, right? I know that, and I know it all the time. Dogs don't. He goes, hey, it's been a month of us not walking with the heel or the discipline. So what happens if I do all this again? And now there's no consequence. He goes, oh, there's no longer a consequence. So now what happens if I bark when somebody sneezes? Oh, there's no consequence. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now we start to regress.
Yep.
So the other side of, or the other importance to the obedience is we're using it regularly to keep discipline in the brain so that the behaviors stay in check.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love it. I think that makes total sense. And he needs some obedience. There's not much. We've started doing heel on walks, and it kind of works. I mean, just recently started, like this past week, because normally I just let him pull me around, but lately I'm just too cold, and I'm like, no, we're going this way.
Yeah.
And so I'll just throw out heel and pull him my way. But
so that's one thing to keep in mind is for some of the training you would be outside.
Yeah.
Okay. So just keep that in mind.
Yep.
Obviously here I have my facility that we can train indoors. I have a backspace that has heated floors, so the backspace is heated up, but it's not where I run my consultations. Plus, I turned it on a day ago, and I didn't realize how long it was going to take to reheat from 50 degrees.
Yeah.
So it's barely 60 back there.
Yeah.
But we have another space if our heat doesn't get fixed up here, because typically we train here as well.
Okay.
But if the heat doesn't get fixed here, then we're going to simply just move everything to the backspace.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's Chicago. I mean, we're gonna be outside anyway, so it's fine.
But then, I'd probably put you like around 9 classes.
Okay.
And then, like, let's say we get 7 classes in and you feel like everything's great, right? And you just have those 2 sitting there. I've had it happen in the past where a client's like, hey, Jesse, like, we're doing awesome. We have 2 classes left over. Like, what can we do with them? In some cases, they'll want to advance their training through, like, off-leash stuff. Bulldogs, they're so slow. It's like, I mean, they can be off-leash trained, but, like, most people don't really have them off-leash.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's always a possibility. But they'll convert the lessons to credit, and then use the credit for like boarding or daycare.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that was
So
going to
your
be my
money
next
won't
question.
go to
Yeah,
waste.
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So you buy a package? It's like a
Yes.
package of 9?
and if
Okay.
you do more classes, it's cheaper per class.
Okay.
Okay. If you do less classes, it's more expensive per class.
Okay.
So what clients will do is they'll do like 9 or 12, use as many as they need. They'll give it some time.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, you know what? We'll keep 1 or 2, and then the rest will convert the credit.
Okay.
And then they'll do daycare.
Yeah, because I'd
or
love him
whatever.
to be able to come once a week just for socialization. Like if
Yeah.
he got to that point where he could come and, be in a room with
Chances
other.
are by the second or third class.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, so like once he learns place, which is stationary control, we do that here. So we do 1 hour rotations. So it's 1 hour in group, 1 hour doing place and like just chilling out, 1 hour on treadmill, 1 hour in the kennel, and then repeat. Most dogs will do just one treadmill session a day. So then it'll be like group duration work back to the kennel.
Okay.
But it's not like in a room with dogs for 4
Like
hours.
just sitting there doing nothing,
Yeah.
which is what he was doing. Yeah.
Because it can become stressful
Yeah,
or
yeah.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
And then like let's say somebody sneezed and he barked,
Yeah.
we would correct it just like you would correct it at home.
Okay.
So we also reinforce the training in that regard, which
Okay.
keeps everything consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Do you have like a vet or somebody nearby if something? I mean, these guys are prone to a lot of health problems. So, like, if there were an issue, is there like if he were boarded here or something? Do you have a vet?
So we don't have a vet nearby. We just go to MedVet. MedVet is the
One
emergency.
on California?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's up by us. Yeah, that's where we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we go there.
Okay.
We've taken dogs to like their respective veterinarian. Only issue if something came up like that was an emergency, when we've called them, they have no availability.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we're full,
Yeah,
so we always
yeah.
just end up going to MedVet.
Yeah. Yeah,
almost
they're
always.
24/7. Yeah.
Unless something happens where it's like we can book an appointment and it's not urgent, like a UTI or something. But in the past, that's what we've done.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
I mean, I think you answered almost everything, and I'm sure once like we started training, I'm going to have a lot more. But yeah, just kind of getting them prepared would be my biggest. What should we be doing to get them ready for any kind of training?
Anybody
Anything-
who's going to handle him or apply the training is welcome to come.
Yeah, I'm going to make them come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's you and your husband and your
Yeah,
as a
my
son,
son, yeah.
son, what I do is I focus on the primary handler. So if that's you, it'd be you, right? And then if the second primary handler is your husband, then I work with him. And then if your son's there too, if there's enough time, and then I'll work with him. Let's say we're a couple classes in, and it's like, hey, Jesse, we're good, but we'd really like you to work with our son today. They go, great, no problem. Now we work with the son.
Okay.
And then having the 9 classes also just gives us more time to make sure I can kind of keep everybody on the same page.
Okay.
With training the sessions, what's nice is that I can send you the link, and then you always have them as a reference. So sometimes you may forget something or misremember something.
So we can watch
You
it.
can always go back and
Oh,
watch the
perfect.
video. It's also helped to resolve a few couple disputes
Okay.
that don't agree on what Jesse said
Yep.
during the training
Yep.
session. So I'm like, just watch the video. There
So
it
how
is.
long are their sessions?
An hour.
Okay.
1 hour once a week.
Okay. Once a week. All right.
Yeah. There might come a certain point where I go, hey, everything's looking good, and now you need time. Okay, so it could be class 5 or 6, for example. And then I'll tell you, go and practice everything, push the behaviors like we've been doing, come back when you're ready. That might be 2 weeks, that might be a month, that might be 2 months.
Okay.
You come back when you're ready.
Okay.
And then when you come back, you're like, hey, Jesse, everything's doing good, we're making progress, but we're having an issue here. And then we address the issue.
Okay.
So some things in the beginning are step by step.
Yep.
But then there comes a certain point where it's like, okay, now you need time to practice and reinforce.
Right.
Sometimes we make mistakes.
Yep.
With like this client that was out for 3 months, they came back with it was a lot of questions. It wasn't even really training, but it was all stuff that they misremembered, forgotten
Right.
the emotional component,
Right.
raising the number,
Right.
and then they're going to take a couple of weeks, and then they're going to have their next class. So,
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
I just had one question that flew into my head and then flew out right when you were talking about the training. Oh, when like it sounds like you have a long wait list for training, or like when
Right
could
now,
we
what
start?
happens is I'm in the middle of a weird period because of the holidays. So typically it's boarding trains and daycare trains go up, and then in-person training goes down. And then the summer comes around, and then in-person training goes up.
So we
boarding
could
trains go up.
potentially start.
Yeah, you should be able to get in.
soon?
It just depends on your availability.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you want to expedite things, when you leave, you can email Tina.
Yeah.
Say, hey, Tina, I want X classes.
Okay.
I recommend 9, but we have anywhere between 3, 6, 9, and 12.
Okay.
Definitely don't do 3.
Yeah.
6 is bare bonesing it.
Yeah.
We don't prorate programs either. So if you did 6 and need to buy more, it'd be more expensive.
Yep.
So 9 is what I would recommend. If you want
Yep.
to do 12, you're welcome to.
Okay.
And then send her your availability
Okay.
because that's what she's going to ask you for.
Okay.
Okay. And then she looks at your calendar, she looks at my calendar, and goes, here are some options.
Okay.
And then you pick your option, and then once a week at that time, we would see each other for an hour.
Okay.
Okay. If you need to cancel or reschedule, we need 40 hours in advance.
Okay.
Just because if you cancel too short notice, I can't fix my calendar,
Right,
and
right.
then I have gaps.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, good. So I just reach out to Tina when I get home and kind of go from there. I don't
Correct.
have to do anything to
And I'm going to send her the information for the collar that you'll need. It'll be the Dr. Black edition.
Okay.
When you buy your stuff from us, it's 10% off.
Okay. How much is the collar?
Without the discount, it runs around $340-ish with tax.
Okay.
With the discount, I think it drops around to like $310-ish.
Okay. And do you have those prongs you were talking about, or do I
Yes,
have to
we
get
have them if
those
we need them. We start
allergy
with,
ones?
Yeah. If you want them off the bat, we can just.
Yeah, I would
invoice
assume
you.
he's got skin issues.
Okay. Then
Typical.
just you can note that in your email to her.
Okay.
Because it's not very common that we need them. And then she'll send you a contract.
Okay.
She goes by the contract. Once that's signed and submitted, she knows that you're being serious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, we're serious.
And then she'll get you on the calendar,
Perfect.
whatever. Feel free to ask questions about the contract.
Okay.
But what's happened in the past is people ask a lot of questions, and then when they come back, I'm ready to book. They're like, "Well, Jesse no longer has the availability because it was booked by another client." You know. So
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. Okay.
But feel free to ask questions. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty common sense based stuff.
Okay.
The only thing is just the cancellation policy, and then we are paying full before we can get started. So we have a payment plan. So like I had a client who did a payment plan. She did her consult like 3 months ago, and she barely just finished paying it because she wanted to split it into like 6 chunks. I mean, so that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But we're not going to start until it's paid in full. Okay.
Is there any point, have you ever seen a dog where you were like 3-4 sessions in, you're like, this dog is just not going to work? Like, no?
No.
Okay.
So that's the power of e-collar. It's are you going to do it? That's what it always comes down to is, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because if he's super stubborn and he needs 80, 90, whatever, I'll go there. Is the human going to go there when I'm not there?
Yeah, right.
Okay. I've also had some cases, and I don't think this is going to happen with you at all. But I've had dogs that were so aggressive they needed 2 collars. So you can have one remote that goes off to 2 collars at the same time. Okay. But they were like 150, 130 pound dogs. Okay. So their size overrode the intensity of the collar that they need a second collar. Right. But also for the human, they go, well, yeah, it's a 150 pound dog who's aggressive. So of course, like I would maybe need a second collar to override everything. I've had maybe 5 to 6 cases like that in 15 years. It's super rare.
Okay.
Almost all dogs on the appropriate collar just need 1 collar.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like if it's like, hey, he needs 2, I'll do 2. I'll get it done.
Yeah.
But it's the human component of like, I don't know how I feel about that.
And it's quick, right? I mean, it's just like I'm going to admit this on camera. It's going to be embarrassing, but I had my sister-in-law, like I wanted to feel what it felt like. And it was just like a tingle kind of like a, when,
Momentary.
Yeah.
Correct. There's
Okay.
2 settings. There's momentary or the nick, and then there's continuous.
Okay.
Continuous is up to 12 seconds, but the moment you release, it stops. We use continuous 0.01% of the time. Okay. We train 99.99%.
That's like a
of the time,
dog fighting situation or something.
potentially. Or like, let's say it's common where like a client will be out at the park with their dog off leash. A kid will blow up a firework.
Yeah,
and the dog
yeah,
gets
yeah.
scared and runs away.
Yeah.
And they have to override that.
Okay.
That we would use that.
Okay.
Very rarely do I use it in aggression. Most of the time with good conditioning, we can just do it with the regular function.
Okay.
But every now and then, if a dog, usually a power breed, goes into an intensity, and we need to break through it, then it's the continuous function.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we cover all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
All right. Well, Kim, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so
I'll
much.
email Tina, but then also feel free to turn around to email her.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she will follow up with you.
Yeah.
Because I send her my recommendations, and she turns around and she follows up.
Okay.
But if you want to expedite things, you can just say, hey, sign me up, 9
Yep,
classes,
yep,
here's our availability.
Yep.
And then she already has all the information.
And then if we want to do some in-home ones, do we have to book those now, or can we see how the first couple go and then be like, let's try the...
So we always do, so you can do all your classes at home. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive.
Okay.
If you want the convenience. If you don't care about the convenience and you want to do the obedience here, we do it here. But then we have to do the behavior ones in the home.
We do have to do that, definitely.
Because that has to happen.
Yep.
That's where all the issues are.
Perfect. Okay. That's probably what we'll do. We'll come here initially and then move in home.
Yeah. Okay. And it's also nice because if we're in home and we're doing the heel exercise, like we're going to be outside, rest here, at least we have coverage and some heat to be able to just focus.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah. Okay.
All right. Great. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
You're very welcome. I'll grab your mic before you go.
Oh, yeah.